everyone. Welcome to Digital Health Talks. This is Megan Antonelli, and today I am joined by Nayan Patel. Nayan is a seasoned healthcare technology executive and a strategic advisor who has spent his career building responsive organizations that drive real operational and clinical outcomes. Now, serving as SVP of Transformation and Digital Health at Neteera, Nayan brings a rare combination of health system CIO experience, strategic advisory work, and a sharp eye for where technology actually delivers value. We're catching up with him ahead of ViVE to talk about what's on the minds of CIOs and CISOs right now, and what's worth getting excited about in digital health in general. Hi, Nayan. Great to have you with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. That was a great introduction. Better than I could come up with myself.
Well, I got a little help from our friend ChatGPT, right? But you have an impressive background, and it was so great to get to know you a bit at Health Impact. I've certainly followed, your career as you've been a CIO and worked in a number of organizations. But tell our audience a little bit about what you were doing before you joined Neteera.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, I'm a former hospital CIO, spent probably 10 years in the seat, directly in the seat itself in a hospital. And I think there's something to be said about that. You get that firsthand experience of talking to the clinicians, understanding the workflow throughout the facility and the hospital. And, there's floors involved. There's different operational areas where you can enter, you can't enter, and there's different rules you have to look at. So I think that experience certainly helped prepare me in many different ways. I've been in the healthcare technology industry for about 20 years, but the last 10 really with the CIO. Now, in terms of, what I'm doing since then, and then before Neteera, I've been involved in interim consulting work, interim CIO roles, as well as I joined for about a year with the revenue cycle platform. So I've got that experience as well. But Neteera is where I'm at now, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. It's, contactless, passive patient monitoring of vitals. So we have a radar-based solution that can monitor patients for heart rate, respiratory rate, inhale-exhale ratio, and then we're going to look into blood pressure as well. So I think the key thing about that is the ability to have it reducing nurses' time to monitor patients. And so however we can help the nurses, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I've, had the chance to meet a lot of the folks at Neteera and see how, that product and how it really has been able to work within the health systems and really power, that remote patient monitoring and, healthcare everywhere. And as we see that, kind of becoming, I think I said maybe when we saw it Health Impact, it's kind of the hospital's dinosaur moment, if you ask me. Like if they're looking there, sort of, or blockbuster moment, if you will. They're looking at this, and I've heard from many of them, we're not there yet. We do it. There's some capability, but it's like if they keep looking the other way, when patients want it and they need it, they're going to have an extinction moment because somebody else is going to provide it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's harder these days is all the different ways you can collect data on a patient, and some of it's manual. And that's one of the biggest differences when we think about remote patient monitoring. We hear so many people have the Apple Watch or the Oura Ring, and there's these different ways that we're able to get data. But how do you make it seamlessly part of a day-to-day workflow? That's the key thing here. And we have that ability to kind of tie it into an EMR as needed, different applications. And the big thing, I think, is what we call early detection, right? So being able to identify when you're going to detect an adverse event might happen. And that's what all these tools are about. It's being able to trend data and then seeing, hey, your body is doing something and this might be happening soon. And the earlier we can get it, that type of warning, the better the clinicians can do their job on taking care of the patients.
Right. And I think in the past, before the sort of computer power to some degree was there to be able to kind of take all that data and look at it and have those warnings that were meaningful and time, sort of at the right time in the right place. There was a resistance to say, if we have all this data, then we're going to be liable. Then we're going to, how are we going to assess when all of these things are happening and be sure that we're on top of it. And I think what's great about tools like Neteera and what, sort of the whole ecosystem of what's evolving is that with the power of what we've got, we're able to kind of make those identifications and make sure that the clinicians see it at the right time and they're able to respond to it. So I think we're at a really interesting time because all of those things are finally coming together, right? Where the technology and the sort of computing power to support it is making it easier for clinicians, not just sort of another additional alert that they need to pay attention to.
Well, you hit one of the key points that we always try to make is another alert, right? Like, I mean, not only are they reducing the number of clicks for clinicians, but it's reducing the alerts too. Make the alerts very meaningful and something that's actionable, because, you don't want to have the alert fatigue, because there are a lot of red moments out there that, okay, you just stare at one screen, they're just red everywhere, but which one is something that's truly a red? And to be able to prioritize those alerts and make them more meaningful, that's what we want to do. Industry as a whole, right? Like, Neteera is trying to do with its part, but I'm going to say we're meeting with our CIOs of different hospitals. Everybody wants the same thing, try to improve that clinician experience so that they are more effective in what they do without being bombarded with yet another system.
Right. Yeah, no, and we see that. But speaking of being bombarded, as we were coming together with ViVE just coming up next week, and then HIMSS soon after that, and I know you'll be attending both, and you've been very involved in, HIMSS, Dallas HIMSS for a long time, and I think we're seeing so much. Certainly, last year it was just all about AI. Maybe the year before that it was all about AI, and everybody sort of talks about how it is everywhere. But tell us a little bit about what your history with ViVE is, what you're excited to see. What are you looking forward to next week?
Yeah, in preparation for this, I was wondering how many ViVEs I had been to. And then I looked back and I actually went to the first one that was back in Miami.
Oh,
and
cool.
so I've been to all four, I think, that has existed. So this will be number 5 or something.
Yeah.
So, it's, a couple of times I've spoken, other times I've been an attendee. Different roles that I've played there, and it's certainly grown. It's become more of that large. It's not quite as large as HIMSS, but it doesn't need to be. It serves a different purpose, and it's a good collaboration of getting the right people together. And I think it's really like getting the right people in the same room together at one time, right? Because everybody's dealing with the same type of things: staffing shortages, patient safety gaps. These are things that are happening across the board in different systems. And it's nice that you can get these different people to the same platform. So, and you're getting the investment community that comes to this, to ViVE anyway. And so all of these conferences serve a certain purpose. Yeah. ViVE is what I'm looking forward to next. And then we'll, hit HIMSS up. I think one thing somebody said is one of the places where ViVE is where you start planting the seeds, and HIMSS is where you start watering the seeds.
Uh-huh. Right.
So yeah. They kind of go hand in hand to some degree, that, kind of helps you set up for that.
It does, and I think that's a great way to look at it. There's definitely logistical challenges with them being so close together, but there is some value to that in that, one, it does get different, even when ViVE is in Nashville and HIMSS is in Orlando, or, regardless of geographics, the audiences are different. There's certainly a Venn diagram of folks who overlap, but I think the, sort of core attendance is much more varied at HIMSS. And while that may not provide value to everyone, there is a certain value to having, kind of different, really the different functionalities, represented, like a higher concentration of sort of revenue cycle and security and your clinical executives, whereas ViVE might take, at this time, it'll be a little bit more leadership focused and what have you. But I did notice actually there's a fair amount of security professionals going to ViVE this year. And certainly, as always, because of the partnership with Chime, the CIO. So when putting on your CIO hat and, kind of where you're thinking of what people are going to be talking about and the topics that you've seen some of your friends speaking about and all that, what do you think are some of the topics that are going to be most important to those CIOs and CISOs right now?
Yeah, I think, one of the things is the Provider Connect program really kind of puts everybody together. And we know it's like speed dating, but the reality is you're not having to try to figure out who you want to meet with, and it's not a random crapshoot type of thing. It's a little more directed, and it does get you focused. And it doesn't mean every meeting you're going to have is going to be successful, but over the years I've found, 1 in 5 type of meetings that leads to something substantial. So that's, the first thing that I would say is that it's getting all the people in the room for that in-person conversation that, you're not going to get out of an email or a campaign or a website or whatever, webinar even. So that's building that trust. In terms of the topics, you know, AI governance is probably a bigger thing. It's more like, how are we using AI today? We know it's going to be used. It's your secondary companion everywhere you go, right? Like, if you're not using it, you're kind of missing the boat. Like, everything you wonder about or what you're trying to do, AI can give input into that. So that's obviously there. But how do we use it? What do we make? What do we give it, not give it, type of thing. So that governance piece, I think, is going to be a key conversation. And then, of course, you mentioned, the security professionals are coming in. So cybersecurity will be something that's always there. It's table stakes, but how is it going to change now? What are the rules and the guardrails that we need to put up in a different way? And
Right.
so I think you'll see a little bit more around those guardrails.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like when I'm looking at the agenda, and of course, when I'm hearing folks, even coming out of health impact, some of the old topics are new again, right? I mean, some of the things that, we talked about a lot during, kind of when EHRs were being implemented, because it was such a transformational platform shift, are happening again. Talks about, shadow IT and, build versus buy, and how do we, ensure the governance and who's involved, and all of those, sort of fundamental IT questions are coming, are circling back, maybe with a little bit more wisdom now that we've been through the experience of the last decade or so. But it is interesting to see, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting enough, as part of one of our CXO panels here in DFW, we were looking through what kind of questions were being asked over the last several years. And it was actually 7 or 8 years ago, we were asking the same question about AI. It's not the AI what we experience today, but there was a version of AI that was out 8 years ago. It's like, so what are we doing with AI, right? I mean, it's in a different state today. So
Right.
yeah, I think when you put on the hat of the CIO, it's now, I came up with an interesting term. The CIO actually it's a new meaning. It's curators of information and outcomes. Okay, so I just kind of came up with something there. It's like, that's what our role is, to take, what we're trying to put in with technology, look at the data, and then help the outcomes. At the end of the day, that's really, and so we are business leaders. And I think the role is respected more by everyone within the organization, that the dependency on technology, how does it impact outcomes? What are we going to do? Because it is an ROI type of decision on all the money that we're spending on tech now.
Right. Yeah. And, that's, it's funny when I think back to the first health impact, our tagline, because of meaningful use, was, technology from meaningful use to meaningful outcomes. I remember everyone was like, oh, but it is. And it's not just about the financial and the return on investment value outcomes, but obviously clinical outcomes. And how do we kind of get these technologies to move from shiny object to real value? And I think my sense of of the topics and discussions that people are going to want to attend are the ones where people are talking about the value that they're getting, out of these tools, and where they're seeing the most value, because that's where the discussion has shifted to. It's not just like, oh, it's available, it's here, we have to adopt. It's, what's working and what's not.
Yeah, and I think the value question comes into play in many different ways. I think the thing that we're also looking at is platforms are more important than one-off solutions, because we want to do more with less, reduce applications, right? So the platform play, whichever part of the healthcare tech you're in, comes into a bigger conversation. And how are we helping the organizations truly do more with less? And so there are some risks that you have to take because you're consolidating. You may not get everything you want in a single app, but make sure that you're growing. And that's one thing that we're also trying to do as we grow with Neteera. We're going to be like thinking ahead. We're looking ahead of what do we want in the future, but getting with the hospital leaders to identify what is important, what we should be thinking about and building. And I think every organization is going to be trying to do that. Because if
Right.
you're not, then you're just another add-on and nobody wants any additional add-on. It's already a spaghetti system that we have to manage.
Right.
But
No, I liken it to sort of, cable television, TV now, right? I mean, how many subscriptions can we have and how many subscriptions can we manage? And ultimately, we never can find what we want to watch because we don't even know where to look. And, we
it's
don't
a
want to
great
do we
analogy.
don't want to do any more of that in healthcare. It's complicated enough. On the other hand, there's a risk to just picking one platform that maybe hasn't come up with the best solution, for everything. So, and it takes me back to the EHR discussion where, there was a lot of, it was built for a revenue system on a, sort of primary care basis and left out a lot of things for specialty providers and all of that. And of course, over the decades that it's evolved and added in a lot of other solutions, but it's a little bit of a picking the right horse with a platform solution as these things are developing so quickly, but also the right tool for the right job is still really important in healthcare. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I hear it, I'm hearing it a lot, and it'll be interesting to see how things sort of flesh out at these, at ViVE and then HIMSS with various announcements of, whether people have built in new tools and all of that. So
Yeah,
lots.
there's risk associated with all this, right? Because the health systems want to do more with less, and but then you're like, how much you locking yourselves into one platform, and what's the change cost down the road, right? And I know, obviously, you're going to be signing multi-year agreements, but some of these multi-year agreements are going to span decades, right? I mean, that's just, I remember when I was at one of my prior organizations and we finally moved one of the older EMRs out. I mean, it celebrated 32 years before we put it to bed. So these things last a long time before you can truly migrate it into something else. And that's what you're looking at. Anytime you put in a new system, the question is, how long will it be around? Where does it make sense? And we don't have all the answers, obviously. I mean, if we did, we wouldn't be in business, but
Yeah,
that's
no,
part of the challenge we have.
right. Well, and that's, I mean, the speed of innovation. And I think when I think about AI and where we are, and we were just talking a little bit about kind of, however long, 30 years ago, the internet was the new change that was going to come and change everything for how we all worked in every industry. And now we have AI and large language models, having that similar impact. But the other side of that is the speed at which people can innovate and iterate is so much higher because of all the tools and all the compute power that we have. So to see how fast change happens, and when you think about things like you make commitments and technology gets implemented for 30 years, that won't work in this new sort of faster paced innovation cycle that I think we're about to kind of step into. I think we're only
Yeah,
seeing the tip of the iceberg.
there are definitely some things that are adopted very easily. We know how quickly ChatGPT went into everybody's hands, right? I mean, that's literally and you're easily accessible. And now there are multiple versions of that, whichever tool you're deciding to use. But look at ambient, right? Ambient documentation. That's also something that's going to become a standard. But now we have to make sure it's the right standard. And what are the fallbacks from there? We're always talking about, real life scenarios. Well, how many of I ask this to a lot of people, how many of you people watch The Pit on, the TV show about the Pittsburgh ER? And they actually talk about the ambient AI in season 2 here. And so they're contemplating like, where does it, draw the line? Where is it truly accurate or not? And even if you say it's 98% or 99% accurate, you don't want to be the 1%, right? In healthcare, it's very different to be 1% off.
Right.
It could be life and death type of thing. So it's we're getting there. So it still requires the human element. And all these things that we're doing will require the human element. And I think we're at an interesting time right now to utilize all this stuff that's around us and then implement it, but keep looking at the processes and making sure our processes are truly more effective than just dependent on something.
Right. Right. And that's so much of it, right? I love the pit, by the way, but the second season, it does, whereas the first season, there was a lot of drama around kind of the emotion element of it. A lot of the drama this year feels like it is around AI adoption.
Well, there's two
like
episodes right into it. We'll get the next one coming out, I think tomorrow.
Right.
We'll keep seeing it.
Yeah, no, but it is, they've done a great job. And I think that capturing, that that there's some physicians who have that sort of early adoption. This is a great tool. And then there's others. And I love that, in fact, in it's the younger physician, it's the student who's almost, she's more resistant to the technology, but they capture that push and pull well. And of course, the challenge of documentation, which, kind of comes back to, a lot of what, the value that, tools like Neteera bring in terms of monitoring and capturing that information and getting it into the platform. So it'll be fun to see. It's always fun to see at ViVE and HIMSS kind of just those technologies that are available and coming out and what the focus is, both from kind of that marketing side, but, from what they're really doing and what people really, really want, right? Where these health systems are truly struggling and hearing about what they're really looking for. Because I think sometimes there's a disconnect between what the providers need and what the technology companies, find, and certainly what the financial companies, the VCs invest in. So through these events, we get to kind of see where they align, right? So when you think about going, we always like to talk about what are your must-haves? Like, what do you do before for preparing? Do you have like a strategy, comfortable shoes? What's the...
Well, you definitely need comfortable shoes, and as you get older, that becomes even more important. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Shoes is certainly a big part of it. Appearances, it goes, different ways. Some people go very casual, some people are formal. I try to go somewhere in between. There is something to be said about, impressions, right? And we still live in that type of society. So I think that's one piece of it, be aware type of thing. But the other thing is just, you got to go in with a plan. Like all of these trade shows, there is a plan that you can come up with, and you need to look at the agendas, try to figure out what you may have interest in or not. If you're on the partner side, you already know that you're trying to meet up with certain people. So how are you going to try to identify them or meet them? The Provider Connect meetings are great, but then if you're even thinking of meeting somebody, I mean, it's calendaring, right? Like it's put it on my calendar, and you have to pre-schedule these meetings. And, make sure you have a story to tell, just like for us, right? I mean, we're contactless vitals monitoring, right? And we're helping the nurses reduce time. The key thing is just making sure your message is clear. Like, we're FDA cleared. Like, that's a big deal these days. You have to know what it is to make sure that is something that can be implemented, because the one thing you just said a few minutes ago was the change. Change management is hard. You just talked about older physicians, younger physicians, and you're trying to put something into play across the board that not everybody uses it the same way, no matter what the solution you're coming to the table with. So change management is a key thing, but having plan meetings, the message has to be clear, and then, expected outcomes afterwards. Again, same kind of outcome, it's follow-ups.
Yeah. But I do, and I think that's when, as someone who kind of runs much smaller events on a smaller scale, and then you go to these big trade shows and you see there's so many folks who just walk in, and it's almost like a deer in headlights. I mean, many people don't even expect them to be as large as they are, or for the people to really be there, and talk about, people standing at their booths scanning badges. Like, it's about the connection. There's value there was a time when it was about the data. But it's not about the data anymore, because, the lists are there, the app is there. You can see and find people through their email, but that doesn't get you to them anymore. so meeting them, connecting with them, regardless of what your product is, but yes, having a plan, and I think even, your career shows, it's like, sometimes I feel like, I mean, obviously I'm on the media side, so people will gloss over and be like, I don't want to talk to her, but, but the element of, just because someone's maybe at a vendor now and not at the health system that you're trying to get into, they could be there tomorrow. So the connections in healthcare, while it may feel big at HIMSS and ViVE, it's a small world, and people move around, and they'll be the CIO at, wherever tomorrow. So it's best to, make those connections and make those relationships. So, but there's a lot, and comfortable shoes are really important.
Yeah, the in-person conversations can't be replaced. And it's the relationship, because you're not going to sell anything first without trust. And it's just building trust. And that's what you're going here for. Yes, you're going to learn, and a big part of it is education, but an equal part is also the trust that you're trying to build with individuals in the industry. Because like you said, people move around, and that's just the nature of business.
Yeah, it's that trust, and the learning comes from listening, right? And as hard as it's very hard to even just go to the sessions sometimes, because you're just there sort of bouncing around like a pinball machine on the floor, and you could just do that all day. But going to the sessions and hearing what your customers or competitors have to say about what the work that they're doing, is incredibly valuable. And I think sometimes people miss that just for the floor and just to make those meetings. But there is something to be said for listening to what people have to say and being able to talk to them about that later, right? So those are always mine, is, get the sessions that you really want to go down. You're not going to go to all of them, but figure it out. And then, listen, right? Listen on the floor. There's just so much to get out of these types of events if you're paying attention.
Well, and like, it goes back to what you said, just go prepared. I mean, don't expect to just to have everything handed to you, and use the tools that are in front of us to help you prepare. So that's a big piece of it too. There's a lot of things out there that can help you.
Yes. Yeah, no, and the ViVE app is great. Health has done a great job with that, and HIMSS is too. So they're both making those things easier in a world where you've got either 10,000 or 30,000 people. So it's all there. You just have to take the time to do it, to make that, time out of the office, which is hard for everybody, really valuable. Well, we always like to ask, we have, it actually was a segment born our first time back at HIMSS after the pandemic, trying to find the silver lining. So it's sort of what's good in digital health. So it can be about the conferences, it can be much more broadly, but what is most exciting to you in terms of whether it's innovation or platform changes or what have you in digital health?
I think it's about making the patient experience truly what it needs to be, more along the lines of what we all get out of going to Amazon or Netflix today. You search for what you want, you kind of get it, right? And I think we're trying to make our patient experience the same way. So whether we have a simple procedure that's needed, or even just a doctor's visit to a wellness check, that whole experience, we're trying to find ways to make that easier. So then when we go into the facility, I mean, our role is Neteera. We're trying to make that experience easier. You don't have to get plugged up, and, you just get monitored, right? And so all these little things come into play. The scheduling part of it, when you leave, how is that billing handled? And so the whole patient experience, I think we're trying to become more along the lines of what we see as a consumer solution, because it is a consumer product at the end of the day. We just don't completely treat it that way. And there's reasons why we can't, because there's a lot of complexities and health regulations, and state laws are different. So there's a lot of different factors, but we're trying to move the needle in that direction.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that, ViVE does a great job of bringing the patient perspective in, and, sort of making sure that that's where we're, what we're doing, right? And certainly we try at Health Impact to really focus on, delivering technology that improves that patient experience and those outcomes, as you said.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna steal it.
It's all good. Well, I mean, when you think about, even the meeting we just had at Health Impact in New York, I mean, the conversations we had there were broad and wide, right? But ultimately it was tying it back to what are clinicians doing for the patients and making both sides of the house there more effective and more valuable for both, right? I mean, value is subjective, and what that really means, we know, but it has to be a payment and a cost associated with it, and making that whole patient experience what it needs to be. So the events and the people you brought together at Health Impact were great.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it is such, I think there's value when you go really specific within healthcare, but taking that broad perspective when it comes to technology and innovation and how it fits into patient outcomes and experience is so important. So, well, it's been so good to talk to you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week and then just a couple weeks after at HIMSS. Yeah. So, but thanks for joining us here, and, have a great ViVE, and we'll see you there. And to our audience, if you're interested in learning more about Neteera, check out their website. Nayan is on LinkedIn, and you can connect with him there. And of course, if you're at ViVE or HIMSS, reach out through the app. And for our listeners, whether you're heading to ViVE or HIMSS or both, I hope this gives you a sharper lens on where to focus your time and energy. And thanks for listening to Digital Health Talks. This is Megan Antonelli signing off.